the channel. My name's Sam, and today we're going to be talking about Steve Rude. He's one of my personal favorite cartoonists and illustrators, painters, whatever you want to call the guy. He's just a craftsman. One of the very first things that caught my eye for Steve Rude is this issue of Space Ghost. So, growing up, I would watch a lot of these old Hanna-Barbera cartoons with my grandpa via Boomerang, I believe, at the time. And so, I've seen pretty much anything run the gambit on it. Herculoids, Space Ghost, I don't know, Wacky Races, whatever else they aired there. I've seen literally all of it. So when I was flipping through back issue bins, of course, this thing caught my eye. There aren't a lot of Space Ghost comic books out there. There are the old Golden Key comics out there. I do have a couple issues of that. At some point, we'll pull those and take a look at them. They're not the greatest things in the world. They were kids' comics at the time. But nonetheless, there's some cool stuff in there to take away from it. But today, we're going to be taking a look at Steve Rude. Just kind of a quick little retrospective. And then as well, what he's doing today. Eventually, we'll actually get down into the nitty-gritty of Steve Rude. But this is just more or less of a a fast appreciation of the guy. So this was like I said, this is the very first thing of his that caught my eye. And as you can see, that it's crazy the amount of detail that's in here. He had done some of the writing and the penciling here, and he's selling some of these pages, including this one here, on his website for like $5,000 a piece, which way out of my price range. He's definitely out there selling them. So if you guys are interested, be sure to hop on there because as a Space Ghost fan, like this is top tier stuff to me. It looks better than the cartoon. That's something else that we're gonna touch on is a little bit of Steve Rude's influences. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Alex Toth there. Alex Toth was the original creator of Space Ghost, and they had a little bit of a relationship. I guess it was somewhat contentious from my understanding. Alex Toth has a reputation, in the comics community for kind of being, I don't know, a stickler for a lot of things. Definitely somebody who was stuck in his ways, felt like he was better than everybody else from my understanding. Not the case. Love to tell you, Steve, you eat Alex Toth's lunch. We're going to take a look at that, at the things that Steve Rude is doing now. Alex Toth, is probably rolling in his grave, knowing that there's, somebody who had looked up to Alex Toth in general has surpassed him. I'm sure that just gets on his nerves, and I love that. Steve Rude, one of the things that influences on him is Andrew Loomis. So Andrew Loomis has this fetishization with the drawing figures, and you can see that Steve Rude dedicated a lot of his time to figure drawing, and he still does to this day. And it really pays off. There's nothing strange about the anatomy in any of his drawings. That's something that you can see a lot of comic book artists. Some struggle on, some do great on. People have their weaknesses and their strengths. One of which the people, that obviously get looked at a lot, Rob Liefeld, and you can take a look at even Todd McFarlane, one of my, top 5 guys as well. He he has questionable hands a lot of the times too. You know what? Just for example, just what is going on here? His fingers, like I get it, he's like a spider, and he can bend in all sorts of crazy ways and whatnot. I don't know about that hand there, Todd. Good old Spidey, I don't think can bend like that. Good effort though, Todd. It's a good effort. It's all that matters, right? And just that we're on the topic of just Todd in general, if you're in the comic book space and you don't want to be like Todd McFarlane, you're wrong. The dude's a visionary. He changed the toy industry, changed the comic book industry, kicked down all the doors, didn't take no for an answer. and that's a testament. People like to talk shit on the guy, but in my opinion, in terms of career wise, he's done it the best out of any cartoonist or artist out there. In my opinion, the guy just does it right. He still sticks by his fans. But yeah, just anatomy is just crazy good. So if you're a fan of Space Ghost, definitely pick this thing up. You can find it in back issue bins. I don't see it too often. In I don't know, the 15, 20 years or whatever I've been collecting comic books. I've seen this thing a handful of times. It doesn't pop up all the time, but you can find it. You can find it depending on condition in between $10 to $20. I think I paid like $14 for this, and it's pretty much near mint. So if you're a fan of Space Ghost, which leads me to this, good old Nexus. So Nexus is a Steve Rude, Mike Barron, brainchild, I suppose, and this was never on my radar as a comic book collector, and until the last 6 months or whatever, which is kind of crazy to me, knowing that how much I love Space Ghost, and I was going down the Space Ghost rabbit hole. I don't know, like I said, about a year and some change ago, and doing more research on Steve Rude led me across a cartoonist kayfabe interview that they had done with the guy. I'll be sure to link that in the description if you guys want to check that out. But I was watching that and I'm like, oh, Nexus is literally just Space Ghost. I didn't realize. And when we take a look at this, I mean, even on the cover, it's immediately just Space Ghost, Herculoids. Like, this dude looks straight out of Herculoids, like Glebe and Gloob type of stuff. So the story of Nexus is kind of out there. If you want to pause it and divulge into this, this is more for the art of Steve Rude and whatnot. Really not going to get into Mike Barron's philosophies. They've been trying to turn Nexus into a cartoon for, the last 30, 40 years, however long it's been. There is an animated pilot that Steve Rude animated himself. It's pretty cool. You can check that out on YouTube, and again, I'll be sure to link that in his channel, so that way you guys can check that out if you like. Never really came to fruition, in my opinion. It's because of just how wacky the story is in Nexus. Really doesn't lend itself, I think, to a cartoon. In my opinion, I think if they're trying to get this greenlit still, they need to find somebody to redo like the origin stories to Nexus, because how Nexus originally gets his powers and what he does, it's just out there. I'm not really going to get into it. This is straight up just Space Ghost to a T, all the way down to ship design, character design, background design, you name it. This is literally just Space Ghost. So if you guys are not familiar with Nexus, the original Nexus came out through Capitol Comics. This was the color version. This is a redo of the original black and whites. So they were, black and white comics during the 80s, a black and white explosion boom. And once it kind of picked up a little bit of steam, they had gone back and redone these in color. And you can really see Steve Rude, his progression, especially in figure drawing, just in those short amount of years from the black and whites to color versions here. Nexus isn't a very large series. There's about 80 issues, a bunch of mini series placed here and there and whatnot as well. He's still actively putting out Nexus material, so highly recommend Nexus if you're into Space Ghost, into great illustration. This is really top tier stuff. Nexus is one of those things, one of those comic books that, again, I had recently found. It was kind of a life altering thing. It is Steve Rude's work in general, and it's really hard to put a finger on why I like it so much. It's a combination of everything from the technique, the coloring, the design, literally just everything about Nexus I love. I pretty much have gone down the rabbit hole of collecting everything Nexus. However, there is a fun fact. There is a flexi comic, which was basically an insert of a 7-inch vinyl, basically a audiobook little story on a vinyl record they had slipped into the number 3 issue of Nexus through Capital Comics. And that was something that I had discovered actually scrolling through Dave from West Coast Avengers. But yeah, I was scrolling through his eBay shop and actually had seen that, and I didn't know about it prior to that. I reached out to Dave. I'll be sure to link his channel and whatnot so you guys can check him out. He does comic book hunts and everything like that. Kind of does flip throughs as well. So definitely make sure to check him out. But I had reached out to him and asked him if he had known any more information on that book, and from what he was telling me, that they had done the first couple issues or whatever, magazine size, so on and so forth. Really didn't know anything else outside of that. So I had gone ahead and reached out to Steve Rude himself. Like I said, the guy has a YouTube channel, and he does streaming every Saturday. So he's pretty accessible, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. We have pretty much one of the greatest comic book artists, illustrators alive right now, and he's super accessible. You could literally pick his brain about anything, and the guy answers your questions. So I had submitted a question during his stream. He's been doing live ink, washes and whatnot of a faucet illustration, and you can learn a lot of techniques there just from watching the guy, from watching the master work. He does like hour and a half streams every Saturday, and like I said, I asked him the question, hey, how that Fuxy comic kind of come into play. It wasn't put into the other issues. It was only the one. So Capital Comics is based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and I guess at the time the owner had purchased a recording studio. They had the technology, the capability to do it, so it was more or less of a gimmick thing to do for fun. It was a one-off, so really nothing too special behind it. But hey, moral of the story is it's awesome that we can pick Steve Rude's brain out there. So again, you guys should consider checking out one of his streams. One of the things that Steve Rude has done that I absolutely love, there's just a little drawing that he had done in here for Batman Anniversary 400. A bunch of different artists of mine that had kind of worked in this book. If you're not familiar with this book, again, it's just a bunch of different people contributing to a Batman story. It's pretty cool. A lot of different variety. I love books like this. So I love Dark Horse Presents and whatnot. Those style of books where you get a big variety of artists, and this is no exception to that. But we're just going to do a quick flip through, and of course we're going to stop on good old Bill S. here. This is one of my 2 favorite pages in comics, just in general. So this Batman 400 anniversary has been on my list for a while to kind of track down. Believe it or not, I pulled it out of the half price books. My half price books here locally has been getting crazy books in. I'm not entirely sure what's even going on. I've been going in about once every other day, and their comic stock has basically refreshed. And their comic section is getting bigger and bigger. So if you guys have a half price books in your area, I'll definitely try to take a look at and see what they may have in their back issue bins, because I basically got this thing on a steal. I think I paid like $3 for this thing, and this is like a $15-20 book. So kind of crazy, this stuff that you can find at half price. But like I said, this is some of my 2 favorite pages in comics. So Sam Keith is like one of my favorite artists. I'd probably put him again in one of my top 5 guys, along with Steve Rude and Todd McFarlane. You can really see, I think, the influence that Bill S. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. I'm going to butcher it. He's one of the greats, obviously. And when I look at his work, I see a lot of Sam Keith. If you're not familiar with Sam Keith of Max fame, that's probably his swan song, his magnum opus. A lot of people would point to. The thing that I love of Sam Keith, he had done a issue or a little short story called Wolverine Blood Hungry. It's awesome. It's one of my it's probably my favorite Wolverine story. It's super out there, and if you're not familiar with it, definitely pick it up. You can find it for 12, $14 on eBay, um, and it's awesome. It's out there and it's right up my alley. The Sam Keys art's crazy. So wanted to stop here and take a look at this real quick. So a lot of people have their opinions on Batmobiles and how they look, how they're drawn, how they're depicted in movies, so on and so forth. People got opinions on good old Art Adams, you know, Batmobile. I like how it looks like a sports car, muscle car that's been, you know, made into, I don't know, like a souped up. It's, I guess is what I'm getting at, is it's more realistic. It's grounded because of this. The new Batman that's been out, the new 52, so on and so forth, it's very tech focused. I don't like that. It's very sterilized to me, to where when you're giving Batman like too much, it takes me out of it. You know what I mean? I kind of like this more realistic version. You can actually picture, quote unquote, yourself, being in a situation like this. I don't think the normal person is ever going to be in a situation to where they're Christian Bale, Christopher Nolan, Batman in a tumbler rolling through Gotham City in a tank essentially. That's just never going to happen. But some dude could definitely do this to a sports car. But I look at these panels, boom, boom, and this guy down here. I see that there's been some influence, probably on the Tim Burton movies. This comic came out in '86, and when I look at, especially the Joker face on like the helicopter, it looks like something that would be branded for those Tim Burton movies, especially like a Kenner toy or something like that. This is something that always really strange to me, is that the faces are like, they look different in every panel for the for the Joker here. It's kind of weird looking. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and just get to the good stuff here. This is a page pinup, whatever you want to call it, that Steve Rude had done, and I think that says that it was marked as 80. It might be 86. It's really hard. I mean, this came out, the late 80s, so probably makes sense that it's 86. But it's really hard to read, so it's hard to say. The inking kind of bled over on this print, but you definitely can see, especially in the lighting, the Toth influence, especially in this. This is one of my favorite Batman images in general, because you have so many different elements in it, and none of it is overwhelming. There's a lot going on. As you can see, you got him, kind of perched on this construction I-beam. He's got his, I don't know, grappling hook, boa cables. I'm not entirely sure, what this is that he's using, but he's swinging it around, and the motion that Steve Rude is giving it in his his paint here, it's crazy. Oh wow! So I've never noticed this before. So we've got a crane here, right? There's a dude hanging from this. I always, to me, it always just looked like I don't know, like a piece of like rock or something. That's like the crane is getting picked up. Oh, it's multiple people. Hey, see multiple sets of legs. Huh. See, flipping through these things, you see new things every time. That's what I love about comic books. And there's a quick little doodle of Hellboy I had done for on the sticky note. All right, so one of the things that had influence on Steve Rude, going back to cartoons, is Johnny Quest. He had done a couple of Johnny Quest things. Mainly I think he just colored this cover. Wendy Penny had done the insides and the actual penciling on this guy. I figured I would just pull this so you guys can take a look at it. Doug Wildey master illustrator, creator of Johnny Quest. As I'm sure most of you guys are aware, Johnny Quest is one of those TV shows, in my opinion, that is extremely underrated. When you look at cartoons as a whole, Johnny Quest just doesn't work as a cartoon. The stories are great, the illustrations are great, the voice acting is great. Everything about that cartoon is pretty much flawless, and you can't really say that about a lot of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons because they were cheaply produced, cheaply made, and some of those cartoons are extremely janky. You look at Speed Buggy, Jabberjaw, things like that. They are poorly animated, cheaply done. Um, Super Friends even they look like garbage, not Johnny Quest, and I think that's a testament to Doug Wildey. Because I'm sure that he wasn't going to allow that to happen to his property, and the influence that Johnny Quest just has in general on pulp culture. The biggest thing that I can point to, obviously, is Venture Brothers for my generation of the Adult Swim generation, and you know obviously Venture Brothers is just a straight up Johnny Quest ripoff. Master illustrator Doug Wildey, uh, cut from the same cloth as Steve Rude, obviously. They are master painters, master figure drawers. That's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially about comic book artists. You have to draw everything. You can't just get away with drawing faces, doing portraits and things like that. You have to draw doors, you have to draw cars, you have to draw dogs, you have to draw cats, you have to draw planes, you have to draw guns, chairs, beds, speakers, guitars, drums. You see what I'm getting at. Literally, you have to draw everything under the spectrum. Um, so you get people who kayfabe things, who fake their way out of drawing things. You have guys who dedicate their craft, like Steve Rude, Doug Wildey, Andrew Loomis. These style of guys who aren't going to cut corners and are always going to show up every single time they put a drawing on a page, and that's respectable. Um, Unfortunately, there's a lot of comic book artists who do half-ass things, and in my opinion, if you're an aspiring cartoonist, sort of like myself, and these are the guys that you need to be looking at. They're not messing around when they're putting out work. Just real quick, we're just gonna do a quick flip through of this. We're not gonna dig too much into it. This is Doug Wildey. One of the things that I can tell you right away about Doug Wildey is I don't think there's a human being on the planet who draws guns better than he does. And that just, again, that's a testament to his illustration skills. When we get to this, I think it's the next page. Yeah, look at this machine gun on this plane. It's crazy, just the detail on that, and that's painted. He painted that. That's not Photoshop. That's not uh, grabbing an image and clipping it on there. This is a dude looking at a reference material, probably out of a book, a picture that maybe he even took himself, and drew it. Again, very commendable, and that's something that I try to do to myself is uh, draw things that you might not be comfortable with drawing. Are they going to look bad? Yeah, they probably are, but that's just the way that it is, and you're never going to be able to draw things like that if you don't practice. I'm a musician by trade. I've been playing drums, guitar, bass, you name it, pretty much, since I was, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. And that's the thing that people don't see is the amount of time and effort that, artists and creators have to put into their craft to get good at them. The tens and thousands of hours that, I spent on a drum throne practicing nonstop, and people only see the end result. Hey, you can play drums, but they don't see how you got to that point. And to even think that it's that you can get here, that's exciting. I think that it's possible that a human is capable of doing something like this, and that's something to strive for. Again, best guns in the game. Doug Wildey. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. All right, moving on. So this issue of Johnny Quest is different than the other one, so I guess I should have really touched on that. This was more or less this is the Johnny Quest Classics line. These I think they did 3 issues of this. They're just more or less retellings of some of Doug Wildey's favorite episodes in comic form. So that's what these are. These are original stories. If you're not familiar with Kamiko, that was a independent comic book company started by Matt Wagner and a couple other people of Grendel fame. And I believe that he actually does work inside this book. I think he's a colorer. Yeah, he's the colorer on Steve Rude's bit here. So that's one of the interesting things about this Johnny Quest issue is that you get both Doug Wildey and Steve Rude, so you can kind of compare their work side by side, and can definitely see the influence that Doug Wildey had on Steve. In the same book, it's kind of cool. How often does that happen that you have the master and the student in the same thing? It's kind of cool. Yeah, Matt Wagner did the coloring on this, which is kind of interesting. You would think that in his style it would be a little darker, a little more gritty, and he's coloring a Johnny Quest comic, and when you actually look at this, it's definitely a little darker, just in terms of especially here, like in the faces and whatnot. The shading and skin tones are definitely are dark. They're kind of on the gray side of things, as you can see there. There definitely is some peach color to the skin, but there's a lot of gray dirt grit kind of, and I don't know if that's because they're in a desert environment, kind of trying to make them look dirty. Nonetheless, I think it's a good choice. Steve Rude, just master drawing, something that a lot of comic book artists struggle with. They're drawing feminine faces. Some people got to kayfabe them, some people don't. One of those guys that doesn't, Steve Rude. As you can see, the guy can just draw pretty much anything. Johnny Quest, definitely would recommend picking these up. All these Johnny Quest comics you can really find in back issue bins. Typically, you find these 3 are really the 3 that I see floating around everywhere. The other ones I've never seen out in the wild. eBay postings are everywhere. But Johnny Quest number 1, the Johnny Quest 1, and the Johnny Quest 2 are all over the place. There is a Johnny Quest run right now through Dynamite. There's also a Space Ghost run through Dynamite right now that are really good, actually. They touch on a lot of adult themes, and the drawing, art, everything like that in those is honestly top notch. And for quote unquote corporate comics, I think those are the 2 to really look at right now, that are at least worth your time. We're talking about some influences on the guy. Got to talk about Alex Toth, of course, the creator of Space Ghost. Alex Toth, it is what it is. Obviously, the guy, apparently from what Steve Rude was saying, he's out to hurt people. That's just kind of what his objective was. He just thought he was better than everybody else, and thought your work was garbage in comparison. That doesn't mean he wasn't an influence on Steve. Wasn't an influence on a lot of artists. Alex Toth is one of those guys that you see get brought up a million times. So, really, again, we're not gonna trot on that well-treaded ground. But I more or less just wanted to show, this book and the things that were in it. There's a lot of reference material in here, just not cartoon-related things, but, you get storyboards, so you can learn a lot of story techniques and whatnot. But, there's really good figure drawing, character studies. You can see how maybe you need to design characters. Like how maybe Alex Toth would have designed ships. You can see how there's things in here like character bibles, how it's, hey, you only do this, you only do that, you can only draw it this way, the ship always has to do this, X, Y, and Z. There's rules to these universes, And that's something that a lot of people don't think about is you have these things, called character Bibles, to where it's, hey, Batman, he's never going to kill somebody. He's never going to do this. He's never going to do that, X, Y, and Z. And this is like a rule book that basically creators have to follow to keep the character canon with everything else that's going on. A lot of people don't think about that. In Star Wars, hey, we have an X-wing, so every time there's an X-wing on screen, it has to look like this. The hatch door has to open up like that. X, Y, and Z. These are a lot of things that again people don't think about on the creation of characters and everything. So we got another Toth book here. I don't know. This one has more than just his cartoon stuff in it. As you can see, there's a lot of different material in here. Truly speaks testament to, Toth was one of those guys cut from the same cloth as Steve Rude, Doug Wildey. Really dedicated their life to their craft. Their masters because of that, and influenced a lot of people because of that. But like I said, sorry Toth, but Steve Rude's better than you. All right, so what is Steve Rude doing now? As I mentioned earlier, he does live streams every Saturday. Has a YouTube channel, posts videos up there, puts out other work, sketchbooks, and everything like that. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this. This is something that I use, honestly, almost on a daily basis for inspiration, reference material. If you've never seen one of Steve Rude's sketchbooks, this stuff is wild. It really makes you feel like, oh, I need to do a lot of work, because if there are dudes out there that are like Steve Rude, that are like, I don't know, Drew Todd McFarlane's and like that will draw circles around people. I don't want to be one of those guys. I want to be like a Steve Rude, you know what I mean? So this is stuff, again, that you should be looking at. You can pick these up directly from his website. He's going to be doing a Kickstarter on another one, I believe, coming up in like January, February timeframe. He puts one of these out every year. He has a sketchbook compulsion to where he just basically does nothing but things in the sketchbook. Again, going back to what I had said previously, people don't see all the work that that you do outside of what you might post on the internet or might publish in books and everything like that. A lot of your practice ideas, things like that, all get put into the sketchbook. And Steve Rude, he's not ashamed of his sketchbook. He will show that off to everyone, and for good reason, because when I open this thing up and show you guys, oh, this is what he is practicing. And Steve Rude, he's not a young cat. He's an older guy, and he is still out there putting everyone to shame. So let's go ahead and open this up to kind of take a look at what he's doing, today. And this is just kind of a greatest hits of his sketchbooks, from my understanding. A bunch of interstitials that he kind of snips out his greatest hits of the sketchbooks. So it kind of just gives background on his family and stuff, updates on what they're doing and everything like that. One of the things that I love about watching his streams is he always has his animals in the background and whatnot. So if you guys are a fan of cats, dogs, and just kind of seeing them hanging out while people are drawing and whatnot, they're always chilling in the background. And I always make sure that we get our animal updates. So again, this stuff is in a sketchbook. It's in a sketchbook. Not this. This is a finished piece, but this is in a sketchbook. Like, it's insane to me. Just the craft that Steve Rude brings to the table, and the fact that Steve Rude isn't somebody that comes up all the time for just being a master at doing what he does. It's kind of crazy to me. He probably is the greatest comic book artist alive right now, and he's under a lot of people's noses. They don't even realize it. Again, just going back to the figure drawing, Andrew Loomis, 100%. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that drawing. And he always puts like these little interstitials in here. He calls them fortune cookie sort of deals. Just little virtues and whatnot, tips, advice. Some of them are pretty cool. So this was something that I wanted to look at specifically, was his dedication to his craft. So this is based off a commission, and you can see just the amount of work and proofing, drafting, roughs, and reference material and things like that he had made prior to even finishing up the piece, for the customer, for the buyer of the art. It's like shooting pictures of himself for reference material. These are things that guys would use or do back in the day, if they didn't have a model and whatnot. Because it's like, how else would you draw that? They didn't have Google. They didn't have internet and whatnot. So this is what you had to do, and this is something that I do myself as well. Just take pictures and draw it. So you can see that we're still working on his shadow piece that he done for that commission, and we're just talking about different fabric textures, how it's going to look. This is something else that I also use as a reference a lot, is different techniques on how to make capes look flowing in the wind and the lighting on them. Another picture here of Steve, for reference. It's just crazy. This is a drawing here that I've copied a million times over. I love it. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's clearly Steve Rude as the model, but it's I love that drawing. And there it is. That's the finished piece. So you can see that, this pose. There it is. That was the reference. That's the end. So, just to show his imagination, being able to have the slide open, like the shot just went off. A lot of people would probably draw this gun static like this, but they are firing. So at some point, you should probably capture the gun actually firing. This isn't something you see a lot in comic books, and to be honest with you, I don't even think I off the top of my head, I can't even name another book that has a gun like mid slide while being fired. Steve Rude, guys. Again, it's just the things that he's putting to paper. They're little things that add up over time. This, a big wrestling guy, so this is something that Jim Cornette brings up quite often. When we're talking about booking and storytelling and whatnot in professional wrestling, it's the little things that add up and make a difference. And if you're not doing the little things, then you lose sight of the big picture. For instance, there was the match with Rhea Ripley, Dominic, and where he was in the quote-unquote shark cage, supposed to be above the ring, wasn't above the ring, but nonetheless, he willingly went into the cage prior to the match to get locked into it, and then to get ascended above the concrete floor of the entrance ramp. He's a heel. Why is he willingly just going into this cage? Like, he shouldn't want to go into that cage. He's a bad guy. Like, it makes no sense. Like, Rhea should have tossed him into the cage. Lock him in, get in there. That would have made more sense in a storytelling thing. Again, it's just the little details that go a long way. And Steve Rude, he makes sure that his work is nothing but little details, and those little details add up to flawless work. Yeah, guys, I think that's we're gonna wrap it up there. Steve Rude, again, master artist, master illustrator, master painter. Links will be in the description for Steve Rude, for Cartoonist Kayfabe, and then as well for West Coast Avengers, All right, thanks for hanging out and talking comics. Have a good day, everyone.